morning, everybody, and it's Happy Friday today. I don't know why I would be so happy since it just seems like, you know what, as an entrepreneur, you're working 7 days a week at times. So, but it is what it is, and I love what I do. So it's not quite like working, it's my kind of happy time. Good morning, Ari. How are you doing today?
I am great. Good morning. Good morning. It's actually a nice day today. Not gray, it's sunny.
Yes, we're both from Toronto and we're here now. I just want you to remind our viewers outside, even though we are in Toronto and I work everywhere in as long as the Zoom camera will take me. And Ari is, as a realtor, he's in the Toronto area, but he does do outside. But there's more to that. What we're talking about goes beyond. It's these are strategies and information that we're teaching can actually be used anywhere. But most importantly, even when I talk, we also have to learn that part of our life and part of the thing is our attitude towards life, our mindset. It's in everything of what we do in our life. So remember, you know what? Everything we do, whatever you do with one thing is how you do everything. So part of this is teaching you how to think, how to look outside the box. And, we're here to service you and teach you as much as we possibly can. And also, whatever, if you have questions, I'll put in the chat what you need to do so that you can come along to us and talk to us online. But also, like we have already told, you can reach out to either one of us and talk, and we'd be more than thrilled to talk to you about everything that we do here. And we're here to service you and to help you grow. And that's the most important part. So, as I finish blabbing along, let's start. Today, we're going to be talking on the side of a buyer. And, so we'll be going back and forth through all these things because, we're going to go into so many different areas. We're going to be down the road talking about investing, how to work as an investor, all these type of things. But today we're going to take a look at the buyer. And, beyond the actual general requirements, we're going to look at the market analysis and how we go through that. So, let's not wait and let's just jump into this right away, Ari. And
Yeah.
let's start talking about the buyer side of things.
Yeah. So just to touch on what you said, yeah, like we try to keep everything on a high level type of almost like a general information so that it could be used in any market. And also, it doesn't have to be just where we live. It could be used in Canada. It could be used in the States. And then, of course, once you understand this, you can break it down into segments and you can break it down into more of a not just area specific, but every situation is always different. So if as Glenda said, if you do have any questions or if you have a specific situation you want to talk about, just reach out and we can talk about that. Okay. So yeah, so let's jump into it. So we've talked about just to recap, we've talked about requirements. We talked about what it takes to buy a first property and the navigating through how to find an agent. We've talked about and in case you haven't watched the past episodes, we've talked about in general what you need to do, how to get ready, how to think about the future. But today we're going to talk about, as Glenda said, like a general market analysis and points of view. So say, for example, we'll start with you've gotten your approval. You're ready to go and look for properties. You're ready to go and buy a property. You've saved up. Everything's good to go. So what do? Well, navigating through the market could be pretty scary. You don't know what to look for. You don't know where to start. The way I look at real estate, it's almost like a landscape, right? Like it's a big picture, but it's not that hard to break it down. So I'll maybe start with a point by point form. And Glenda, if you have anything you want to say, just jump in.
Yeah.
Current market conditions. So that's the first thing that you want to look at. And current market conditions, the opposite of that is going to be also future market conditions and historical market conditions. You want to look at all three of them. You want to look at everything that's happening and everything that plays a part in whether or not it's a good time to buy. And usually, that's kind of the first question after the whole approval stage. That's usually what people ask me, like, what do you think about the market? Okay, so obviously the market always changes. Obviously every situation is different. I mean, the current market is different, right? And it also depends, and this is what I like to say to people, it depends what you're doing, what your situation is, because every situation is different. So let me jump into a few of the things that I want to talk about. So first of all, are you just buying, or are you buying and selling? If you're buying and selling, you're kind of technically doing it in the same market. So you're not winning, you're not losing, because if, say, for example, it's a buyer's market, which I believe it is right now in our market, you're really buying a property. You're getting a better deal. You're able to put in all your conditions. You're able to say, hey, I want to do a financing condition. I want to do an inspection condition. I actually personally just purchased a property, and my condition was conditional on selling my home. And so that was a condition that we haven't seen in a long time, because, in the last few years, you couldn't even put any conditions in our market. So
Like we were more
I think in the States too.
yeah,
Right?
so we were more in the state of, we had many people going after one property, and it was at that point we were able to, there were multi people going after one property. So even if you list your property, and part of the thing is learning to list low so that you would attract multiple buyers, so that everybody could jump in, and then before you knew it, you were, sometimes well over $100,000 over asking prices.
Yeah, and it's all a strategy. At the end of the day, it was all a strategy, and there's a strategy in every market.
Right.
And in this case, as I said, you could put your conditions in, and so that's what I did. And then it was conditional on selling the house, and now I sold my house. So everything kind of played out the way it was planned, and planning is key. And you need to know what you're doing, and it could be very stress free. Obviously, there's always going to be some sort of stress, but yeah. So that's kind of what I would say, that depends on the situation. If you're just buying, again, this is a great time to buy, because there's two sides of it. Of course, people would look at this and say, well, the interest rates are up. Sure, they are up, but prices are down, right? So it all kind of balances out. And if interest rates go down. Sorry, Glenda, do you want to jump in?
No, I was going to say interest rates are up, and you say prices are down,
Yeah.
but they're down to a certain level. Are they not sort of like now, as I watch the markets and I see that, properties that are under $1 million are still pretty solid at this point?
Yep. So I was gonna eventually talk about that too. So the segments, it's okay. I love this stuff, right? So the segments, in terms of when people look at the values, right? Because the interest rate is high, and approval is a little bit more difficult, especially in the higher price range, like over $1 million, is actually starting to slow down. Like it's going down a little bit in price. However, the 700,000-800,000 range still has multiple offers on it, right? They're still using the strategy, and they are getting a bidding war. However, it's not 100,000 over asking. It's maybe 10, 20,000 over asking, and some of them are not doing that at all, right? So it's again, it's all about being able to navigate through the market, and ultimately, you could win if you know what you're doing. You can win, and even if you're buying and selling, because you just need to know how to buy, you need to know how to sell. But yeah, ultimately, the first thing that people ask me is, what's the market condition? So, I mean, it's a bit of a long answer, but every answer is usually catered to that person. So when they ask me that question, the first thing I do is start asking them questions, like, are you buying? Are you selling? What's your price range? And then once I narrow that down, I can now give them an idea of how the market is trending. And keep in mind, it's also depending on what area. Like the rural areas are different than the subdivision areas.
Right. and being much more like into the city. So once, if you're in the actual city, let's say like Toronto, if you're right in the city area, it's not going to affect you as much. However, I know that the homes over $1 million definitely are much. Right now, they're not moving very much, so it has affected that part. But there is a difference between areas of location.
And I want to add one more thing, because like I actually look at the statistics, right? And inventory is not oversupplied. That's the one thing people don't understand. Just because the prices are down doesn't mean it's an oversupply of inventory. It's actually not. There's still a shortage. It just, if you think about it, right, over $1 million, there's a lot less buyers because the qualifications are a lot harder, and we still technically in where we live in Canada, right, we still have to deal with the stress test, which is an extra 2%. So if you're going for an approval, even though it's like 5% or between 5 and 5.5, you're still technically are being qualified at 7%. See, so that's where it gets a little bit difficult, right? Because you have to have a lot of income to go over $1 million. So that's kind of what's happening out there, and that always changes.
So, and it also reflects about, now let's talk about, the type of real estate that you're looking to buy, because, of course, everything is sort of to one extreme. Like you've sort of, it's like walking up a staircase, and you've only begun, you're sort of looking around, you've done your stress tests, figuring out what you can afford, and maybe you figured out a part of the city, where you want, and that sometimes changes because it also depends, in every area, no matter where in the world it is, it also, is affected by the location, because location is, it's the old story, location, right? So, but it also is, when we go in, is the type of real estate. So, there's condos, there's townhouses, there's detached homes. And we'll talk about all of those things in case some people don't understand. And then, everything plays a difference. So let's just touch on these areas as well, Lori.
Yeah, so let's, I guess, start with location, right? So that's key, right? That's one of the most important things in real estate. I don't want to say the most important thing. I know it's definitely up there, but put it this way. I've seen a home. I'm not going to say it's similar, but it's similar. Like, meaning it's a subdivision home. 40 by 80 lot or 40 by 100-foot lot. 2-car garage, 4 bedrooms, 3 washrooms. It could sell for, say, I'm kind of going back in my head, but probably like 900 to $1 million here in a subdivision area. When I say here, that's kind of where I live.
So let's just say that's outside of Toronto.
Yeah. So that was the next thing. So I was going to say, if you take that home and you put it in, just obviously in like Toronto, or even like, if you think about it, you put it in, I don't know, I guess New Jersey, right? If you're like half an hour away from New York, the price just changes so quickly, right? In Toronto, I know it could be $3 million, right? So it could be 3 times as much easily, right? So when somebody comes to me and says, like, this is what I want, I could say, sure, we have 2 options. You can either find this home exactly the way you want it, but it's going to be 40 minutes or an hour away. Or if the area and location is more important, then you have to, compromise. And so that's why location is very important. But to some people, it's not, right? So when you say location, it's definitely important for resale value,
Yeah.
And appreciation, right? So they will also appreciate very well. Like you said, Glenda, the city, I would say, doesn't get as affected as the suburbs. Usually it's kind of like there's just more density. There's less places to build, right? Where outside of the city, there's always, somebody building something. There's always, not always, but there's land to build. So of course, the more dense the area, the more in demand it'll be, plus amenities. right? But again, it all depends on your lifestyle. That's the key, right? So in regards to the type of home, so there's like you mentioned, you touched on a few of them. So we have, starting from detached to townhouse. There's also semi-detached. Um, there is
And let's explain in case we have people that just don't understand what a between a detached and a semi-detached.
you know what? I think even in the States, I think they call it single family. I don't, I have friends there that we talk all the time, but basically, detached to us here just represents a house that is not connected to another house, right? You have your own house, you have a lot. So typically, a detached property, I haven't seen anything that's smaller than like 30 or 35 frontage.
Well, we have a few of those little tiny houses that are.
Well, the only reason I've seen something that's 30 or 35 is because the back is a pie-shaped lot, but typically it's 40 minimum, right? That's kind of what I see. And then of course, the more frontage and depth that you have to that lot, the more it's worth, especially if you take that lot and you put it in, like you said, like an area like Toronto. So that's kind of the key in what you want to look at with detached. A few other points, since we're on the topic, that I want to mention that a lot of people don't really look at is trees. So I find that like people, they look at the house, they look at like what's been done to the house, they look at the size of the house, they look at the lot, and that's it, right? I know that newer houses and they're typically newer subdivisions don't have very big tree areas, right? But why is it important, right? You have the privacy. And to some people, I mean, I've seen people that just cut them down, but a lot of people really enjoy having big trees and privacy and whatnot. So even if you're buying a house that's not on a huge lot, you can still find something in an area that is mature, right? And it
Well,
does look very nice. Yeah.
let me interrupt you. When, and I don't know how the US is, but I know in Canada, there's a whole thing about, so if you're buying a property and it has lots of trees and you're sort of thinking that you're going to go in and you're going to chop down these trees, or a bunch of, that doesn't happen in the Toronto area. I bought a house a while ago. I was doing actually, it was an investment home, and I wanted to get rid of trees that were actually dying.
Yeah, you need
And
permits.
I had to go through, first of all, go through the city for, and we'll go into these type of things where we talk about investing. But, the whole thing is, why we're doing these shows is there's more to everything than what we think. And, when I went to cut down, there was 3 trees in the back lot of this property that I was investing in. And unable to get down those 3 trees, I had to, first of all, get a permit. And then to take down those trees, I had to buy other trees through the city. So I had to I had to pay for 12 trees just to take down 3 trees. It cost me a fortune. And it was something that I had no idea until I got into it.
Yeah.
So that's why we're doing these things, because, so when we look at, these are things that, your agent will know to say to you, or hopefully your agent will know that, you can't think you're going to go in and just make changes to things. You've got to ask the questions. And this is what this is all about, is learning to ask the right questions.
Yeah, and even Glenda, even you touched on a good point. Even with trees that you buy, there's only a certain size, right? They're not going to be able to bring a tree that's massive, right? I mean, they're still going to be big trees, but they're also, like you said, not cheap. I think they can go up to like 20 grand, right? So,
Yeah.
something like that. So yeah, and you're absolutely right. It's just making everybody more aware that there's more than just looking at a house, liking it, and buying it. Like, you're going to live there. You're going to end up also selling it, right? And if you don't recognize the pros and cons right off the bat, I guarantee you that you will know them when you get feedback when you sell your house.
So that's a very key point. And I always make sure, everyone, I've heard this so many times when people go into buying a house, I'm going to live there forever. Well, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to live there forever. And it's very rare that people, are there, but there are some. But let's put it this way. When you buy a home, and this is what I do, even when I bought my property where I'm in now, I always buy looking at when I'm going to sell. So I buy, as I'm buying it, I'm always looking at resale. So, when I was buying, I'm in a lovely condo now, and I bought from plans. But I knew at the time why I was buying, and I was looking at, okay, I actually did more than I could afford at the time because I was looking at the resale. So that's a very important point coming in. Instead of having those blinders on, it's starting to sort of look at a bigger picture than to just that I'm going to live there my whole life. Well, what happens if you need to sell it? Are there things around there that will make the resale value of your property a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, another example of that is like having closets in bedrooms. It sounds funny, but if you don't have closets, because I see a lot of properties that don't,
Yep.
and then something as small as that can basically bring so many people through the house and not get an offer, right? So it's difficult, right? If you don't know what you're doing, and you can buy something, but as you said, you might think you're going to live there forever, but typically the amount of time that people buy and sell is usually about 5 years. That's what I'm kind of seeing from experience, unless it's like their third or fourth home, and then they tend to like kind of stay there. But usually the first time buyers, or even like moving up, it's not the forever home. There's going to be one more at least. That's what I think.
And if it is, all the more power to you. If when you find a property and you're really happy in it, then that's great. But in the meantime, it's always good idea, because you never know what life does to you and where it takes you. And you want to make sure that you're buying with thought in mind. So, thought in mind means even if your intentions are to stay there forever, well, maybe, down the road you will want to sell. So is your property going to be worth its highest value? Meaning, looking at, if there's stores and there's schools around and bus routes and all sorts of things. So I'm not going to go off topic at this point because I already have, but let's continue going.
Okay, so we touched on detached. Now I just want to take it just one step further. So there's the detached that's in a subdivision, but there's also detached that's more rural, right? So the main difference is that when you're close and you're in a subdivision, you're close to everything else. The water typically is on municipal water, so it comes from the municipality. The heating is natural gas. Same thing with sewage, right? It all kind of goes through the city. You don't have to worry about anything. You just kind of pay for the amount that you use, and that's it. Rural properties a little bit different. So there's a septic tank typically. There's water comes from a well. Heat could be oil, right? So there's a lot of other factors to kind of consider, and then of course resale value, right? Like sometimes they're attractive, sometimes they're great. There's also less competition, right? What I'm seeing right now is subdivision homes, or in areas that are more subdivision. I'm seeing a lot of properties come up, and the price gets lower because sellers are competing with each other, right? Where in a rural area, it's maybe like a handful of properties at a time, and they're all holding the price. No one's kind of like dropping the price, right? So they sit on the market much longer. They eventually sell, or they drop their price, but it's not as quickly as it happens in a subdivision in a down market, right? So that's another thing you got to consider. Okay, so moving on from detached, then of course semi-detached, and that kind of speaks for itself. Semi-detached is really like it's a house, and then the house gets split to two different families. So like it's two different houses, except it's one building, I should say,
Yeah.
and the lots are like almost half the size, right? They're a great option. They're a great option for for someone who is more on a budget and wants to get their foot in the door, but doesn't want to live, say, in a townhouse or in a condo, right? And that's my next point. So then there is the townhouse. Now there's different types of townhouse situations, right? There's mind you, they're all kind of connected by walls. So I mean, there's pros and cons to that. I won't get into too many, but to give you an example, a detached home, you have to take care of all the utilities, the outside, the roof, all that stuff. In a townhouse, first things first, you're both, unless you're in a corner unit, both walls are kind of insulated by your neighbor. So there's pros and cons to that, right? The other thing is sometimes a townhouse could be a freehold, or it could be almost like it's called a POTL, but it's basically like you pay a small common element fee where they just kind of maintain the area. Like I think in the States, like in Florida, for example, there's like gated communities, right? So it's kind of like that, right? And it doesn't really cover, your own portion of your roof, your mechanical and all that stuff. It just covers the roads in the area. So they do the snow plowing and stuff like that. So it's kind of like almost like a mixture between a condo and a house.
And gardening and things like that.
Yeah, like if it's in the communal area, but if it's on your property, it's still your property. So you still technically have your own property, unless, like I said, it's like a common element condo, right? When that's actually more like a condo, right? I can give you a couple of examples. I won't get into that. And then of course there is condos, right? So those are just high-rise buildings, also townhouses, but they're more of not individually owned. They're the same as a condo high-rise building, except it's not a high-rise building. It's a townhouse, like a 2-story or even a 3-story building, where it feels like a house because you have your own entrance. You don't have to go in an elevator. There's no security. You're coming in from the outside. But you're still paying the maintenance fee, which is not as high typically as a condo building. But that's also reflected in the price. So they're more expensive than a condo building. The condo building basically is obviously the ultimate luxury of no maintenance. You don't have to buy a snowblower. You don't have to really do a lot, right? You're just responsible for what's in your unit and how your unit, say, affects other units. But everybody in that building pays a common element fee that basically gets paid based on square footage of what you own in that building. So if you have a bigger unit, you pay more per square foot. And that kind of covers all of your maintenance, security, luxuries, pool, whatever it is that specific condo offers.
And you also have a governing board in the condo building so there's certain things that you can do and certain things that you can't do. So there's rules in your condo building that you have to adhere to.
Yep, and you can ask for the bylaws, but typically it's kind of standard across the board. Some of the things I do like usually suggest to look out for, if you have a pet. Right? Some buildings restrict it, right? Yeah. Sometimes they allow it, but to a certain weight, right? Yeah. Like so if you have a big monster, like what are they, Danes?
Like Great Danes.
What it is? Yeah. Yeah. So like, there's a certain amount of weight restriction that you can have. And
there's all sorts of crazy things.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. That's right. Yeah.
But you do have to investigate it if you do. And trust me, I know that because when I moved into a building, they didn't allow dogs, and I had to give my dog away. Thank God I had wonderful neighbors that loved him the same. But yeah, you just don't know. So it's at the same time, that's the whole thing. It's asking the questions and asking the right questions that really matter, and that's what we're trying to show you and key you into that. These are the things that you have to be thinking of and aware of to keep us going, right? Mm-hmm. So all these areas play a major factor in the market that we're living in, correct?
Correct. Yes. And then, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the different segments, I would say, of everything I just talked about makes, a big difference in how you look at what you're going to do and what you're going to buy, and how it's going to play out in the future.
Okay, so let's also talk about, and I know in Toronto a lot of things have changed, and now I'm hearing about what's going on, and even in New York and everything with immigration, because there's been a major situation going on worldwide with where they're bringing in immigration, and that affects everything with population.
Yeah, so I remember a while back, I was having a conversation with someone about this, and at the time, uh, the real estate market here in Toronto was, and it still is, it's the supply was always kind of low, and one thing that was talked about was the immigration here, right? So I think they're every year they're bringing about 350,000 or so. Like, don't quote me on the number, but that's a lot of people.
Yeah,
Um, and then another thing that I remember we discussed, that this is a really good point. I mean, this is, say, Canada versus the States, for example, right? So in the States, there's a lot of different states, right? And when I say different states, I mean, we have different provinces, except in the States, they're very populated. Where in Canada, I feel like Vancouver and Toronto are the main hubs, right? A lot of businesses, a lot of people come here, a lot of people end up living in those two hubs. Not to say that there isn't people living in other provinces, it's just that it's almost area specific in terms of like what you do for a living, right? But in Toronto and Vancouver, you have everything. It's all like, big mixture of big companies and a lot of work. And so that kind of, I would say, because of that density, the cost of living is very expensive in these two places. So compared to the States, I would say it's kind of more spread out, right? In terms of all the states. And so that's something you want to look at as well. So it depends if you're buying. Like, so the reason I brought this up is because I want to make sure that, if you're watching this and you're not in Canada, you have to look at that. You have to look at the immigration in your state, or what's happening, what are the laws, right? Because if there's more people coming in, or say you're moving from Canada to the States,
yeah,
and you're thinking ahead, and you want to see if that area is going to go up in value. These are all things that are important. Population, right? Here's another one: building speed, right? So, are builders building at a fast rate, right? Like, to give you a small snapshot of what I'm seeing now and hearing. So builders are kind of slowing down, right? They're kind of holding back on building new properties. So they're selling off inventory if they have any, but they're holding off on building for two reasons, right? Material costs
yeah,
is up, and it's been up since COVID, right?
yeah. So that's what
Uh,
I was going to say. Right.
yeah, and
It's
then
affected the bottom line incredibly.
yeah, and so because of that, and so sorry, I was going to say one more. So the second thing is also because the market is slowed down for buyers, so they're taking their time. If they can sit on the land, and they have been, they're kind of letting it appreciate, right? Because they know that sooner or later, what goes up must come down, and what is down must come up, right? So I'm seeing that if builders are kind of holding back, once, say, we tame inflation, and I know this is not just Canada, right? But once inflation is back in control, and everything goes back to normal, right? And I don't know if normal is going to be what we think it is. Everybody's normal is different. I remember when I was paying 4% interest. To me, that was normal, right? To the newer homeowners who purchased in the last few years, their normal is 2%, right? So, and
Yeah,
now we're sitting at like 5.5%. So
yeah,
my point is that once things kind of stabilize, that's probably the best word to use. I think that there'll be a huge demand, because builders are not building as much as they did before, and we already had a market that wasn't oversupplied. Like I actually was working on a letter of opinion for a bank today on a property that I valued back in April. And I was actually surprised because the amount of listings that I saw in the market, this is in Toronto, are almost the same as they were in April. So there's not more listings, right? So there's no overly supplied of properties on the market, but the price dropped by like 300,000, the average price, right? So that's just basically the only reason I think it dropped is because like I said, the interest rate went up, and this property was valued, I think, at like 1.1 or 1.2, and now it's like 850, right? So my point is that the market didn't really change in the sense that there's like, supply and demand. It just changed in terms of how many buyers are out there. But once everything kind of goes back to normal, I think, at the end of the day, as we said in our last few seminars, that it's a basic need. It's shelter, right? So I think that, people are going to end up jumping into the market down the road, and we'll see it eventually go up again, right? It's just almost like this stage now that we have to go through. And you know what? It's an economic cycle, like throughout
Yeah, I was
history.
just going to say, we live in a circle.
Yeah,
Everything is a circle. Like whether it's, even when you look at fashion, everything is a circle. It all, what wasn't out before is coming back, and so on. So the market now is maybe slowing down a little bit because of the interest rates that are going up, and people are scared, so they're holding back. And we'll talk about the next point of that, because it also affects when you're looking at if you're going for financing, and that is, let's look at the age groups of people, because
right.
that
So,
plays another factor on things of, where people are at in their life.
yeah, so that's a really good point, and so I'll make a good example. So my nephew wanted to get into the market, and this was, I think, at the beginning of this year. And when we were looking, I mean, we had a budget of like 500 and 550, and that was, by the way, at the height of the real estate market. And so we found a condo, and it was about 380 or 390 square feet, right? And he's only 20 years old, and it's right in the heart of Toronto. So for him, it's perfect. And he'll resell it one day, or he'll rent it out very easily, right? But my point is that they didn't make condos this way before, and because there's more and more people coming, through, and like we said, immigrants and just population growth, builders have started making very small spaces. So now these big spaces are more rare, right? And so what happens when you look at the big picture? Where do the baby boomers go? Right, people that are retiring, like you're selling your house. Obviously, a bungalow would be ideal, right?
Oh, I love bungalows. Yeah.
Bungalow is ideal, but also, you got to be mindful of the lot. Now, sure, you can get somebody to come in, cut the grass, and shovel the snow. That's fine. But at an old age, for example, you might want to find a property without stairs, and then now your only options are condo or a bungalow, right? And if you're going to go to a condo, do you want to go to a 390 square foot condo when you probably lived in a house for the last 10, 15 years? So you want to look for these big condos, right? So again, these are all market segments. These are all little things that the average person doesn't really think about. And I'm not talking about when you're buying, because right now you might be thinking, well, I don't really care because I'm not buying anything for somebody else. I'm buying something for myself. I want to find something good for myself. But you want to know whether or not it has a good resale value. You want to know if it's going to be easy or hard to sell. What if you don't sell it? What if you end up wanting to rent it out because you want to buy a second property and use that as an investment vehicle for your retirement, right? So these things are usually things that I like to bring up and kind of like, I guess, like, give the person I'm working with a big picture so that they do think, so that they kind of get lost in thoughts, because I want them to be confused a little bit, just because, if I don't do that, then I'm not really doing my job. I'm not really helping the person that is buying, because I want to make sure that they understand all the factors so that they make the best, most informed,
Educated
educated
decision.
decision. That's right.
So it's so, if you're looking to, if you're actually in the market that you want to start looking at buying a property for yourself, and that could be a property, whether it's for you to live in for retirement or for whatever reason, maybe you're looking even for your kids, it's really great to sit down with a book, or, I'm a writer because that's my age group, right? But, or at your computer, and start writing down all your things, all your needs, because it all starts with that. When you go to look, you need to know, if you've got kids, well, you need to know about the schooling, and even if there's no schools in the area, where are they busing kids to?
And let me jump in also. What kind of schools and what kind of
Yeah.
people you think go to school? So I'll give you an example. I was looking at an area. Actually, this is funny because I was looking for myself as well, and me and my wife are, we see this house, it's nice and everything's all good, right? Like it has a pool. This is cool. We like this. All of a sudden, we see this huge military plane flying over us, right? And so we realized that or potentially there could be a military base, and there was. And apparently, these are drills that happen common there. And you know what? When I talked to the agent, I said, um, is this like something that happens all the time? She's like, yeah, you get used to it. So do you want to get used to it? That's, and then also don't forget too, like you said about schools, what if, like a lot of the kids there probably, they are military kids, right? So these are all things you got to take into consideration, right? It all depends on your preference. If you want your kids to go to a small town school, or do you want them to go to a regular public school in the subdivision, right? Or somewhere close to the subdivision. There's a lot of little things. And of course, like the amount of time it gets to get to school. Like, can they walk or do you have to drive them?
Or are there buses available?
Right. Yeah.
Are you on transportation, or is it going to be, hard to get to so you can do transportation? You also have to look at hospitals, if there's, what's around there for, if somebody gets sick. Shopping is really important. How far is there some shopping in the area? So all of these things, you have to sit down, really. I call it a brain dump, and just start looking out at everything, like it's your kids. So you got to look at everything, their needs, and then you look at yourself and your needs, and look at highways, and if there's bus routes, subways.
I have one that usually people don't think about. This is
What's
a
that?
good one. Internet. You'd be
Oh,
surprised how many places have internet. So there's like the Elon Musk internet, which is the satellite, which apparently is good, but it's not offered everywhere. So you have to basically go online and go to the website and make sure that you can get it. Because if you're like a little bit further away from that subdivision, you might be limited to like a rural company. And if you're working from home, even if you're not working from home, even if what if you stream everything? A
it's
lot of
true.
people do that. What about your cameras? Right? They use your internet, right? So if you have like 3 cameras in your house, like Nest cameras, and you have like another 20 or 30 devices, your internet could be substantially slow and you might not be able to do the things you do. So these are things that people don't think about. And it's huge, huge, especially because imagine what happens if you buy a house, you love the house, you love the property, but you don't have internet, right?
Oh yeah. And also, I found when I bought one of my houses, my own property, we had a lot of problems with the internet because of, first of all, we had tons of trees. We had a lot of problems with getting, the electricity kept going out because of all the trees and things like that. Things I never even thought of, which affected all my brand new appliances because there were surges of the electricity was going on and off. So a lot of things that you have to really look. So that's why we're doing this. We want you to start thinking. We want you to start looking. We want you to ask questions. And it's these questions, you know what? And remember, no question is ever stupid to ask. If it's on your mind, then it's important to be asking. Let's talk about what to look for if you were buying. Let's say, we've got a lot of people that now the baby boomers are getting older, and a lot of people are going out of their homes and going into condos. Let's look at that for a second and saying if you're looking to buy a condo.
So yeah, if you're looking to buy a condo, there's a few things. So you kind of touched on it earlier, but I'll go over that. So typically with condos, unlike detached or semi-detached, you don't really value them as the same way. Okay. Typically with condos, obviously it's location first, and you cannot compare a unit in one condo to a unit in another condo. You just cannot do that. Like, it doesn't happen, right? You compare units in the condo versus units in the same building, same condo. Okay. Now, the next thing that breaks down is basically price per square foot, where in a house, you don't do that, right? You typically don't look at price per square foot unless you're building from scratch, right? Then you work that out with the builder. But in a condo, that's kind of how you value what a condo is worth. Now, obviously, if a condo is renovated, then the price per square foot can be higher. And if it's not, or if it's not updated, then you take that into consideration. Another thing you need to look at, and this is a big one. Actually, these go hand in hand. So the floor height. So, are you buying on the main level, or are you buying in the penthouse? Are you buying also a condo facing south?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that south is always the way to go. You could be facing south and you can have a building in front of you. But if you don't, typically south facing condos are higher in value, right? So you got to look at those little things. Then you got maintenance, right? And by the way, if you're wondering what's better, high floor, low floor, there's no better, right? Typically, I would say ground floor is great, but there's specific buyers for it, right? Just because typically, if you're buying on the ground floor, you might actually, depending on the building, you might actually get a nice big terrace, right? Almost like a walkout. So it feels better. You don't, some people don't like going up in an elevator if there's a power out, especially nowadays, right? You don't know what's going to happen. There's so much uncertainty. And penthouses are great too, right? They're very, very nice. And most people, when they think of the penthouse, they immediately think the value, should be the highest. And typically it is. So there's penthouse, lower penthouse, and then there's everything in between, which, it's pretty normal. I'll give you almost I don't know, this is more like a general guide. So when you buy pre-construction from a builder, they charge between $500 to $1,000 per floor. So the higher you go, it's typically measured by $500 to $1,000. That's kind of how you look at it. So if you were to buy a condo, say you were to buy one on the 10th floor and one on the 15th floor, you could, make an offer reflecting that. And you could say, I'll give you an extra 500 per floor, or I'll take out 500 per floor if you had a comparable sale. And so those are just some of the things to look at. Of course, balcony or no balcony, bedrooms, how many bedrooms. Another key factor, I know some condos have a one bedroom plus den, but they have two washrooms, right? So that's a big deal, because having a condo with one bedroom and two washrooms is great, because you can have one for yourself and one for your guests, right? Typically one bedroom condos are just one bedroom, one washroom. So I've seen quite a few with two washrooms. That's a good layout. But layout, since I'm on the topic, is very important, right? Not just the square footage. The layout is very important, right? There's some units that stick out like a sore thumb, like the one I just described. So if it all depends on how it works for you, but also you got to think in the future how it's going to work for someone else. The next thing I want to touch on, and this is something you touched on already, but this is a big one. So condos have a condo corporation. So the corporation is what you mentioned is where you would go and say, hey, no, I want to redo my floors. So you'd have to go there and kind of like say, like, I don't know if it's just verbal. Obviously, like they'll probably give you something to fill out. They just want to make sure that, to give you an example with floors, that you're gonna uh, have someone professional that knows what they're doing, and that they also put a certain material so that, like, when you're walking around in a condo, the person under you doesn't hear you walk around,
So
right?
I'll speak to you about that. In one of the buildings that I have, enabled to do any type of, and this is not necessarily all because it depends on the board that you're dealing with. But for them, it was like you have to fill out exactly what you're doing. You need to, if you're doing any plumbing, it has to be a registered plumber. You have to have his certification papers. Everything has to be out, because let's put it this way: if you do any work and you don't have a plumber who's a real certified plumber, like if it's just the guy Charlie who's an old friend that's been doing a little bit of plumbing here, and you have a leak, you're responsible for that leak. If that leak goes, because I've been there, yeah, where I had a leak in my place, and it affected the tenant or the people down below me. I was was responsible for that. So my insurance had to cover those things. So they make sure, majority. And if they're not asking these questions, here's another thing: you might think it's a pain in the ass, but here's the thing: if they don't ask, it's never mind for your security, it's for everybody else's. So if they're not asking all these questions for you, if you're going to do in it, then you're going to think of what's going to happen in this building, because then it's not going to, this building, they're going to have lots of major problems. And we'll just touch on one other thing, and we want to move along because time is going by too fast. But the other thing is, look at the standing of the board, and is when things have to go on in your property, because all properties have to be upgraded, whether it's the garage, whether it's the the air, the furnaces in the property, in your buildings or whatever. Are they doing special assessments, or are your maintenance fees covering that all the time? So can we just touch on that quickly? Because that's a
Yeah,
huge.
yeah. So I'll try to kind of crunch it all in one. So yeah, there's definitely some big major items you want to look at. So to give you an example, I remember there was a condo that had the balcony glass that fell down, right? So all these traits that built that condo, after they're done and after the condo is built, they hand it off to a board of directors, which is now the condo corporation. And so if something happens, they have to now go back and say, sue that company that put that together. Now, at the end, if they say they don't win, right? Where is that money coming from? It's coming from you, from the owner. And so that's some of the things that you have to look at is, and not you, it sounds like it's a lot, but what you would do is take this, it's called a status certificate, which is all the paperwork that you can get requested when you purchase a property. And so your agent will get that for you. The seller usually pays for it, and then you submit that to your lawyer, and your lawyer will review all this stuff. They'll also look to see if the current owner that you're buying from has any liens on that property, if they've ever had issues, or like they're behind on their maintenance. Back to what you mentioned too. What if there was a lawsuit in the building, right? Like, I think there was a couple of buildings, there's some deaths, for example, right? If somebody died on the property, if and these things can cause a stigma. So even if your unit is fine, if there's issues with the building, even if they were fixed, even if it wasn't, about money, right? If somebody died, right? If somebody got shot in that building, in an elevator, that could cost you, right? So there's a lot of things that are related to that, and these are things, again, you kind of need to know how to navigate through that. But that's when it comes to condo corporations, that is something that definitely plays a huge role in whether or not you should be buying in that building, right? And you know what? The funny thing is, I just want to say this really quickly. Even if there is issues, even if there was something, there's always a buyer. It just reflects on the price. I've seen it, right? I've seen condos sell for like $200-300 price per square foot, um, less, and people buy them, right? Because at the end of the day, sometimes you do what you got to do, but when you sell it, you're still going to get that money back because somebody else will look for that. There's always different markets. It's like, I'm just going to throw this out there. It might sound funny, but there's some people that shop on, like here in Canada, in Toronto, we have Bloor Street, where all the, Louis Vuitton and all those big, like Rolex and all that stuff, like all these big players, right? And then some people don't. Some people want to go and buy stuff somewhere else where it's like, cheaper, right? And so there's nothing wrong with either, right? If you have the money, if you don't have the money, it doesn't matter. The point is, there's a different market for everything, and I think that's the same thing when it comes to real estate. That's kind of how I look at it, right? But it's always good to know, for yourself, which market are you in? Are you looking for the best? Are you looking for, maybe you're looking for just a good deal, right? And I think we were going to talk about that maybe next time, but yeah, that kind of ties into, what are you buying? Are you buying an investment, or are you buying a house for yourself? That's something
And sometimes a good deal, like, like I bought a house at one point that nobody would buy. I was buying for investment purposes, but nobody would buy because everybody walked in and said how much it stank because it smelled the smoke. And I looked at it because of that. Nobody bought it. They were sitting at this property sat on the market a little bit long. And I went in and I went, ooh, opportunity, because I knew what to do to get rid of the thing. And I was going to do some work on the property anyways. And for me, it flashed out opportunity. So, what is good for one isn't good for the other. And it's just being able to think outside the box.
I bought a fixer upper, and 4 years later, I sold it for like 400,000 more. So
Opportunities. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's time to think outside the box, ladies and gentlemen, whoever is watching this. That's what this is all about. So we have already come to the end of our show. It went fast. Can you believe it, Arie? Another day.
It was awesome. I enjoyed it.
So, you know what? We want to give you information to help you grow, to help you think more, to allow you to start writing down questions, because no matter who you have working for you, it's all about you doing what's good for you. Don't worry about other people. Everything in life is doing for what's good for you. What's good for one isn't good for the other. This is your time to shine. And remember, you all have options in your life. Take what is good for you, and it's going to build you into the person that you need to be. And remember, our home is just one of the most important parts in our life. That's where you lay your head. Arie, you have a quick last moment thing to tell our guest?
Every person's needs are very customized, and as you said, the best way to find out what you're looking for is to go to a professional, and not just in real estate. I do the same thing when it comes to not my business. Know what you're capable of and know what you're not capable of.
And that's a great way to end it. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend, and make sure that it's your time to shine. Be well. Thanks, Arie.